The rise and proliferation of remote work is having huge effects. So I found this article and I wanted to talk about it. It's The Pending Collapse of Urban Real Estate and the Return of the Exurb. And it's by Justin Shea. So anyway, here it is. As people flee cities and work from anywhere become a reality, the collapse of urban real estate and the return of the exurb may become one of COVID-19's many lasting legacies, for better or worse. So this is specifically talking about the effects of remote work on real estate, which of course is coincidental with where people are choosing to live and locate, and how the rise of this phenomenon is transforming society, but it's not exactly the same thing, and it's a different aspect of it, because they seem to be talking directly about real estate as the sole focus of this article, rather than the broader social effects and the different locations of where people are working. Though, of course, where people choose to live has a huge effect on real estate, and so you're going to touch that when you're talking about real estate. Anyway, let's continue with the article. Real estate may get weird after COVID-19. Cities have been necessary to economies because they offer proximity that allows us to be more productive, a phenomenon known as agglomeration. Due to agglomeration, cities have fared far better than rural areas in an issue that Paul Kohler dubs the geographic divide. Economic pressure, technology, and COVID-19 contributed to increased acceptance of work from anywhere culture and accelerated the resurgence of interest in suburbs and exurbs that may result in an urban real estate crash. Specifically, I think people are going to move to exurbs of smaller cities and metropolitan areas rather than ultimately move to the exurbs of existing large, major metropolitan areas. What does the future look like if people permanently migrate away from cities and no longer need or want to cluster in large metropolitan areas? Yeah, that's more like what I was saying. On the other hand, people who have been on the wrong side of the geographic divide may finally get some relief. On the other hand, the economic impact of COVID-19 may make the next financial crisis even worse than the last one and force a mass American migration to abandoned towns in the middle of nowhere. For over a century, humans reaped the benefits of gathering and specializing on an industrial scale. Yes, as industrialization has risen, there's been huge urbanization, especially where the phenomenon has been most advanced in the most high-income developed countries. So, continuing with what they're saying, as the story goes, specialized workers formed companies and benefited from the proximity of other specialized companies. In turn, both workers and consumers benefited. For example, being in close physical proximity allowed people to trade ideas, buy goods, and sell services to each other with relative ease. Productivity increased and economies boomed. In simple terms, the story of people specializing and gathering is the story of modern-day city or metropolis. Many people know the story from grade school. It's a story of how cities made possible the emergence of specialists like lawyers, artists, and bakers. In economic terms, the story of specialization and productivity gains in the cities is known as agglomeration. According to Weber's, agglomeration is, quote, a localized economy in which a large number of companies, services, and industries exist in close proximity to one another and benefit from the cost reductions and gains and efficiency that result from this proximity. In short, agglomeration is sufficiently weird enough a word to describe the whole story of people's specialization in cities. COVID-19 may go down in history as the great equalizer that brought urban real estate values crashing down to earth while inflating suburban home values and accelerating the return to the exurb. For most of modern history, specialization and productivity gains demanded physical proximity. However, in a post-COVID-19 world, rapid advances in technology and fast-changing work culture may help us realize the effects of agglomeration from anywhere. Yes, the rise of the internet and improved communication software is enabling people to collaborate and work with each other in ways that just weren't possible before. And that's going to have a transformational effect, as I talked about before. In early 2019, I first learned about agglomeration from an audiobook version of The Future of Capitalism, Facing the New Anxieties by Paul Kohler. In all likelihood, I would have forgotten about Paul Kohler. However, when COVID-19 turned our world upside down in early 2020, his story about capitalism came rushing back to my mind. Paul Kohler described the rise and fall of capitalism through the lens of geographic divide between the province and metropolis that is premised, in part, on that magical concept of agglomeration. In Collier's terms, a metropolis represented two things. First, a metropolis is a physical place, such as cities and major suburbs. Second, it's the concept of a group of people who have become detached from the rest of the world. For contrast, Collier similarly defined the province as two parts. The province is essentially anywhere else, including places like farmland outlying rural areas. Secondly, the province includes a different group of people, with opposing ideologies and economic fortunes, that diverge significantly from the metropolis. According to him, since 1980, provincial cities have declined economically relative to the metropolis. For example, the productivity gap between metropolis and province widened by 60% in terms of income, job growth, and housing prices. In turn, the gap in economic fortunes drove people to extremes in some ways. The toxic political environment today is a predictable result of the geographic divide. Coller's argument is in part based on traditional understandings of agglomeration, that people need to gather in close physical proximity in order to be productive and specialize. As a result, it's worth asking, what happens to the geographic divide if agglomeration is achieved without cities? Something good, bad, or really bad? As many settled into another month of unprecedented long-term remote work, in 2020, TechCrunch published Work from Home is Dead, Long Live Work from Anywhere. With the idea that work from anywhere, TechCrunch colleagues the binary concept of having to either work in the office or work from home. Instead, the author, Danny, points out that terrible branding of work from home because it fails to communicate the fundamental freedom that comes with the new policies. In 2020, not only is work from anywhere an interesting idea, it probably better describes what is happening now and what is to come in the future. For example, several tech companies were quick to announce permanent work from home policies, and it's not too far-fetched to think more companies outside of big tech will jump on the bandwagon. Yes, recently I've seen surveys speculating that at a minimum 25% of jobs will convert to permanent work from home within 2 years after the dust settles from the pandemic. But I guess we can only know for sure if we wait and see what happens in the future. So anyway, on a personal level, I've already seen the effects of work from anywhere through social media. Over the past several months, I noticed posts containing pictures of beautiful mountain scenery as friends or friends of friends retreated to the mountains and worked happily from a cabin in the woods. Although many seem to have returned from their mountain retreats, it really got me thinking, maybe I could live that life too. Although there are industries that may never work from anywhere, for the overwhelming majority of people primarily engaged in the information economy, work from anywhere appears to reflect reality rather than a radical idea. If you can technically work from home forever, why pay premium to live in a city when you can live and work from anywhere? As illustrated by a Zillow report, the average urban home value per square foot over the past 20 years has steadily outgrown the values of rural homes. For years, people sought out urban living despite the crowds, tight spaces, and high rent. For the right job, it was all worth it. Being closer to the city meant you had less of a commute and access to better jobs. Social life was somewhere downtown, and life without a car was much easier as long as you lived along the right train or bus route. However, as TechCrunch suggests, with work from anywhere, a broadband connection is all that's required to be close to the right network. These days, my chances of getting a great job may be more of a function of a LinkedIn algorithm as opposed to having the right zip code. And what may signal a reversal, on June 19th, 2020, CNBC reported home searches in suburban areas doubled the growth pace relative to urban areas. The article goes on to contrast the surge in suburban real estate interest with an 80% plunge in apartment contracts in New York City. However, the article makes an interesting point. The resurgence of suburban real estate is not new. Instead, COVID-19 seems to have accelerated an existing trend. What happens when everyone wants to live in the suburbs? Cue suburban sprawl and the return of the exurb. What is the exurb exactly? Beyond the suburbs lies the exurb, a place with homes so far from the cities and suburbs that they are actually affordable and big enough to raise a family. In addition to presenting an opportunity for young families to grow, the American exurb is also infamous for its role in the prior decade's financial rolls. As MarketWatch calls it, the exurb is a sort of ground zero of the housing crisis. As a result, the exurb is the place where suburban sprawl ends and the remainder of economic boom and bust. In the current exurb boom cycle, a Wall Street Journal article called the phenomenon as early as 2017, with an aptly titled article, Why the Exurbs Are Poised to Take Off in the Coming Years. 2 years later, in 2019, MarketWatch seems to have confirmed the hot exurb market with a cautionary article titled, Why You May Want to Think Twice About Buying a Home in the Exurbs. Although the WSJ and MarketWatch probably did not account for COVID-19, their reporting affirms the exurb as an existing trend that predates the pandemic. The flight to the exurbs and suburbs are important pre-COVID-19 trends for the three reasons. First, the growth of suburbs and exurbs may represent an economic response to the geographic divide. In other words, people can only take so much to make the city viable. Moreover, as job losses become permanent, people may end up having no choice but to move to nowhere away from high rents. Second, the internet and better connectivity have steadily improved and made it feasible for people to work from anywhere. Although the trend toward work from anywhere was already in place, COVID-19 has both accelerated the trend and forced our work cultures to adapt to it. Third, and most interestingly, the exurb this time around may become a permanent fixture of the American real estate landscape as people try to escape COVID-19 and job losses in the cities. Is an urban real estate crash a good thing for low-income renters who have been on the wrong side of the geographic divide for decades? Okay, so I think this is the end of the article. These are just references that the author cites that you could look into if you want to examine this issue more. Well, okay.